Everything happens for the best, Jake. A 25-year-old traveler was wandering through a dense forest. He felt completely defeated. His clothes were torn, his feet were covered in dirt, and every step he took reminded him of his misfortune. Earlier that day, bandits had stolen all of his belongings, leaving him with nothing. Distraught and out of options, he stumbled upon a wise mentor named Brother Mark, who was around 50 years old and known for his calm demeanor and deep insight. Jake, tears welling in his eyes, told Brother Mark, "How can you say everything that happens is for the best? I've lost every single thing I owned. My money, my supplies, everything is gone. I don't even know how I'm going to get back home." His voice was trembling with anger and despair. Brother Mark listened patiently. He then placed a reassuring hand on Jake's shoulder and said, "My friend, don't lose hope. Sometimes what seems terrible at first can lead to something wonderful later. Let me share a story with you, one that might change your life if you listen closely." Jake sighed, still frustrated but curious enough to hear what Brother Mark had to say. The farmer's plight, Brother Mark began. Once in a small village several miles away, there lived a farmer named Benjamin, who was about 45 years old. Benjamin had a wife named Charlotte, 40, and they had a 20-year-old son named Ethan. They were a very modest family, living on a tiny patch of land, just a couple of acres, where they grew crops for their own food. One year, a sudden and devastating flood hit their village. The water rose several feet higher than anyone had ever seen before, sweeping away almost everything. Benjamin's crops, household items, and livestock were destroyed. Their simple wooden house, which wasn't built on high ground, collapsed in the raging flood waters. In the aftermath, standing on soggy ground and looking at the wreckage, Benjamin was utterly heartbroken. Charlotte tried to comfort him, but she too was upset. They had lost so much, and they had no idea how they would survive. However, Ethan, their son, looked at his parents and calmly said, "Dad, Mom, don't worry too much. Whatever has happened is for the best." Benjamin was stunned and furious. He shouted, "How can you say something so ridiculous? We have nothing left. No food, no house, nothing. We're practically homeless now, forced to live in a makeshift shelter I pieced together with some branches and scraps. In what world is that a good thing?" Unable to contain his rage, Benjamin ordered Ethan to leave, feeling that his son's words were heartless and naive. Overwhelmed by the stress and not thinking clearly, he blamed Ethan for adding insult to injury. Heartbroken, Ethan gathered what little he had left and walked away from the village. Evening came and Ethan still hadn't returned. Charlotte begged Benjamin to go find their son, but Benjamin refused, his pride and anger clouding his better judgment. The rescue. That same night, Brother Mark continued, a rescue boat arrived. A group of volunteers had traveled several miles by boat to help the flood victims. They began assisting the villagers with supplies and offering temporary shelter. Charlotte pointed this out to Benjamin, suggesting that perhaps Ethan had meant that good things would come eventually, even out of the worst situations. But Benjamin, still upset, replied, "You don't understand. Yes, these people are helping us, but everything we had is gone. My special pouch, which held something incredibly important, was washed away too. It might have changed our lives, but now it's lost forever." Charlotte asked what was in that pouch, but Benjamin refused to say. He simply repeated that there was no point talking about it now that it was gone. Over the next few days, they survived by borrowing food from neighbors and picking up odd jobs around the village. But as time passed, it became clear this wasn't sustainable. Additionally, the flood had ruined the fields. The crops on their 2-acre plot were a total loss for that season, so there was little hope of earning any income from farming. Searching for work. As the situation grew dire, Brother Mark said, Charlotte suggested that Benjamin should head to the nearest town, about 5 miles away, and search for work. They didn't have a proper house anymore, just a small shack made from salvaged planks of wood and pieces of tarp, barely standing on a few wooden posts. Still, Charlotte remained optimistic, offering to do housework for neighbors to earn a bit of money while her husband looked for a more reliable job. Benjamin took her advice. He walked along the muddy roads into town, passing fields that once were lush but were now covered with flood debris. He visited shops, small businesses, and market stalls, asking anyone he could if they needed help. Over and over, he got turned away. Nobody needed extra hands, or at least nobody was willing to pay. Despondent, he returned home late in the evening, feeling defeated and worried about his family's future. Trying again the next day, Benjamin had no better luck. People would shrug and apologize, but no offers came. On his way back through the forest path toward the village, he encountered another wise teacher. Someone I happen to know well, Brother Mark said with a smile. That teacher listened to Benjamin's problems. Benjamin explained how he had lost his home, his crops, and even his son, who had left after a heated argument. The wise teacher told Benjamin, "Don't lose faith. Remember, sometimes what looks like misfortune can bring unexpected blessings." But Benjamin grew upset again and snapped, "How dare you tell me this is a blessing? I have no food, no proper place to stay, and my own son left because I yelled at him. I'm in a worse position than ever before, so don't try to tell me it's all for the best." Nevertheless, the teacher simply repeated that Benjamin should be patient. "You may not see it now, but you will have your answers in time," he said. Then he gently went on his way, leaving Benjamin feeling both guilty for snapping and puzzled by the idea that something good could ever come from his tragedy. A turn of fortune. Soon after, Brother Mark said, pausing for a moment, Benjamin had a stroke of luck. On his 3rd day of job hunting in the town, he met a wealthy merchant named Mr. Carter. This merchant was known for his generosity and for providing work to those in need. Mr. Carter took pity on Benjamin's hardships and offered him a job managing deliveries for his storehouse. The pay was fair, enough for Benjamin to buy some supplies and help Charlotte fix up their little shack. Not only that, but Mr. Carter also mentioned that he had a small vacant cottage near his estate, about 30 feet away from the main house, and he offered it to Benjamin. Though Benjamin initially declined, not wanting to impose, Mr. Carter insisted that he could stay there if needed. Grateful beyond words, Benjamin accepted the job and continued to work diligently. Charlotte was overjoyed. For the first time in weeks, they had a sense of stability and hope. One night, as they were settling into a routine, there was a knock at the door of their small cottage. Benjamin opened it to find a young man in his early 20s, clean-shaven, neatly dressed, and carrying a large bag. It took Benjamin a moment to recognize him, but then the realization dawned. It was Ethan. Ethan exclaimed, "Dad, it's me." Benjamin's eyes filled with tears. He and Charlotte were stunned, hardly believing that their son had returned. After hugging his parents, Ethan explained that when he left the village, he traveled to a distant city to look for work. He had found a small business opportunity, invested time and energy, and ended up making a substantial profit. Now, he'd come back to share his success and ensure his parents would never have to struggle like that again. "Dad," Ethan said with a triumphant smile, "I told you that what happened was for the best. If the flood hadn't destroyed everything, you wouldn't have become so desperate that you lost your temper and told me to leave. I might never have discovered my business venture in the city. And if you hadn't come to this new town looking for work, you wouldn't have met Mr. Carter, who has given you a wonderful opportunity, realizing the truth." Benjamin finally understood. Brother Mark continued. He was overjoyed, hugging Ethan tightly and thanking him for his perseverance and positivity. Charlotte, with tears in her eyes, saw that everything truly had worked out for the best. The family had more resources than ever. Benjamin had a decent job, and Ethan had built a successful business in the city. They were financially secure, and their relationship had grown stronger through adversity. They recognized that sometimes the greatest struggles bring out new paths in life. Brother Mark paused, letting the weight of the story settle before concluding. Benjamin and his family learned that even though we can't see the full picture immediately, a bigger plan is always unfolding. When we remain hopeful and keep our hearts pure, we realize that what initially seems terrible can become a doorway to something unexpectedly good. Jake's revelation. Jake stared at Brother Mark, processing every word of the farmer's story. He took a deep breath and said, "That's a nice story, but I still don't get how my being robbed fits into any kind of greater plan. I have nothing left." "How is that good?" Brother Mark smiled gently. "Jake, as I was walking through this forest, I found something on the ground. It's of no use to me, but perhaps it will help you." He handed Jake a small pouch containing a glittering stone. "Go into town and sell this, or keep it. Either way, it should solve your immediate troubles. If you hadn't been robbed, you never would have crossed my path. And if you hadn't met me, you wouldn't have received this gift." Jake carefully examined the stone. It looked almost magical, shimmering in the moonlight. Brother Mark leaned in and whispered, "There's more to that stone than meets the eye. Sometimes great treasures find us only after we've lost what we're clinging to." Jake's eyes widened. He realized that his terrible misfortune had led him straight to Brother Mark's guidance and this mysterious stone, a blessing he could never have imagined just hours before. Suddenly, the phrase, "everything happens for the best," didn't seem so impossible to believe. The moral Brother Mark placed a reassuring hand on Jake's shoulder. "Remember, we cannot always see the road ahead. When dark times come, our thinking gets clouded, and we may act out of fear or anger. But if we keep faith and don't make desperate decisions, the storm will pass. In time, the reason behind our hardships often becomes clear. Sometimes, the greatest opportunities emerge only when life pushes us out of our comfort zone." Jake thanked Brother Mark, feeling an unexpected surge of optimism. He realized that adversity can be a catalyst for change and growth. Holding the stone tightly, he started on his way toward the nearest town, reflecting on how misfortune had led him to a chance encounter with great potential. As he walked deeper into the forest, he repeated the words to himself. Everything happens for the best, feeling hope blossom where, just moments before, there had been only despair. If you enjoyed this story and its message, remember to keep your heart open to possibility. Challenges may arrive in the most daunting form, but often hidden within them is the seed of something profoundly good.